I'd like to introduce you to Pearson, who is an environmentalist here in the Annapolis area where I live, and one of my first living heroes. She inspired me to look at how I consume things and how I viewed the earth and my place on the earth when I first met her during a program called Leadership Anne Arundel. And during that program, she did a presentation on stormwater management. And since that time, we've worked together on a couple of projects, including building rain barrels and also rain gardens in some of a local community. The following is an interview that I did with her where she told her story, and I'm looking forward to doing more things with her in the future. There will be more reports on her work along with how we're working with her. She is one of my living heroes.
What happened to me is where it started, when I lived in the cabin without power and plumbing and telephone, and learned I became so steeped in my relationship to I lived there for 8 years alone, and I became so accustomed to feeling that the creatures, the birds, the deer, the foxes were my companions, and that the forest itself, that I understood for the first time what it really meant to belong to the earth. And I don't have to say that. I can go straight into what I'm doing here now.
Tell me the story.
All right. Well, I began to feel that my children needed to understand what the essential elements are, what's essential to us to survive well, to live well, to be happy. And so we all agreed to go live in a log cabin on the very tip of a 75-acre wooded peninsula down east in Maine. The cabin was so close to the water that you could almost jump in from the cabin into the tidal reaches, which were fast-flowing currents. I lived there for 8 years alone. We had no power, no plumbing, no phone, and we walked the 1.5 mile trail to the road to go anywhere, or went by snowshoe or skis in the wintertime, carrying backpacks I even managed to carry eggs in skiing without breaking the eggs even when I fell. And I became so accustomed to thinking of the trees and the sea and the winds and the warblers in springtime, the deer and the fox, the myriad creatures that lived either in the woods or in the waters as my companions. And I was so steeped in that image of myself in that place that I understood for the first time what it means to belong to the earth. And we all belong to the earth. But we've forgotten it because we've become so used to building things on the earth that put pressure on the earth for its own services to survive, so that the clean water that we drink, that we draw from the aquifers, is no longer clean, some of it, and the rain is running off the rooftops and pavement and parking lots and roads into our creeks and carrying contamination into them, so that in many instances it's not safe to swim anymore. Certainly if you have a scratch, you should not go in the water. The health department says you shouldn't swim after 48 hours after a rainfall. So we've become accustomed to the hard edges of things that we've built, and we think of that as our place. But really, the forest and the rivers and the creeks and the marvelous natural things that live in those places are our place. And without a healthy place to live, we become less healthy. There's lots of asthma and lung cancer and other ailments that are carried by bacteria in the waters, so that some people who have just had been splashed by water and had a scratch have the bacteria has infected them, and they've had to have operations and antibiotics for as much as 8 months. So we are to be healthy and spiritually healthy as well. We need to understand what our place is and how to belong to it successfully so that we all survive. So I've been working to do that sort of thing, to help people understand. I left my cabin to come do public education, and I give PowerPoint presentations to people. I work with government and businesses and citizens to bring them together to understand that we all need to thrive, and we need to do the things that are critically important to our future in order to thrive. So it's not, am I going to have a job, or am I going to have a clean environment? It's, how do I have a job that is based on a clean environment? So now people are building houses that are all built from green materials and reuse their water, so that when you flush the toilet, it goes into a system that cleans it, and you can reuse the water instead of taking scarce water from the aquifers to flush our toilets and then emptying the toilets into a sewer and processing it, cleaning it, and then sending it out into the bay. We can be self-contained units. There is no a way in which to throw things. It all comes back to us. So I started a nonprofit, the Alliance for Sustainable Communities. And the work that I do is funded by, and many times, the Chesapeake Bay Trust or the Bay Program, the Chesapeake Bay Program, in an effort to bring to people a better understanding of what all the ways are that we can encourage the survival of our support system, our ecological support system.
Now, I know you in talking about stormwater and the importance of controlling that stormwater from just going straight into our creeks and rivers and eventually into the bay. Are there other things that you work on in your alliance? And then we'll come back to the stormwater, because that's what this is going to be about.
Well, yes, I do a lot of things. For instance, I've been encouraging people to plant trees. I've been working with, because the more trees we have, grass is green concrete. The water just runs off it. Whereas trees, in their canopy, they hold the rain, and it even runs down their barks. Often in a rainstorm you can go out, and under a tree it'll be dry where it's wet everywhere else. So it captures the rain, and it also puts it down into the ground and then draws it up and re-evaporates it, so that it continues what's called a water cycle. We've been working with county government on restoration projects to understand how the best designs can restore the character of the flow of rain that we have become accustomed to putting into pipes and sending out into the creeks and rivers untreated. I'm now working to develop more of a fund so that we can buy more land to preserve it, because there's too much land that is zoned for development. And for instance, in the Severn River watershed, 20% of the remaining forest will go will be bulldozed for development if current zoning pertains. And the only way we can save those lands is by buying them or buying easements to protect them. I've been working with an innovator in Massachusetts who installs something called a living machine, or a solar aquatic system, which is a greenhouse with vats in it, all of which are linked in a process with biological materials, including plants and fish and mussels and snails and bacteria of various sorts, that cleans sewage from our homes and then pipes it into the homes again to be used to flush toilets. I want to get approval for that use in Maryland. And I've been working on new stormwater regulations. We passed a bill in '07 called the Stormwater Act, which establishes the parameters, the guidelines for MDE, Maryland Department of Environment, to change its rules so that instead of bulldozing the land, as you see often happening, so that 25 acres of forest are cleared all at once, we limit the amount of clearing, leave trees on the site, make much smaller development clearings for each house or building, and preserve all of the characteristics of the landscape that are important to the ecosystem surviving. Mm-hmm. And in that way, we can actually put narrower roads, shared driveways, less impervious surface, less asphalt, and covering the land. And we can use porous pavement, which allows the water to seep down into the ground under the pavement. We can use rain gardens and living roofs so that the landscape becomes a sink for stormwater, for the rain, as it used to be when the forest was present. When the bay was healthy, 95% of the landscape, that is the bay watershed, was forest. So with new development rules, we can replace the negative impact that we've been having by making places for us to shelter and cause the rain to go back into the earth to refresh the aquifers and provide base flow to our creeks, as it has in the past.
Mm-hmm. So, when we talk about storm water, rain, let's start on the positive side first, and let's just say if we lived in the perfect world, what would the rain do? When the rain came down from the heavens, it would...
Well, it would immediately be captured in the canopy of the trees. Even in winter, the bare branches of a tree will mm-hmm. capture water, and the trunk of the tree, and then the roots, and the centuries old in the original forest, centuries old leaf mold, where the leaves of the trees fell year after year and decayed and became a rich mulch. Into that leaf mold the rain goes, and then into capillaries into the roots of the tree, and then re-evaporated into the air. But in the process, the rain will go into what's called groundwater below the surface, and it has little channels in which it flows. Seeps is really what it does. Seeps slowly into the creeks and provides a base flow, what's called base flow, constant flow, even in times of drought, to the creeks, so that they have a very slow, easy, and in the process the water is cleaned by the roots and the plants, so that it arrives cool and clean and slowly.
Mm-hmm. So that's what should be happening.
Yes.
And so today we've had a lot of development in all parts of the nation and the world. So now when the water comes down, it does what?
Well, depending on how much we've covered the earth, it will all run off. It's engineered to run off into big pipes. That surface covering the land with asphalt, as we do with parking lots and rooftops and driveways, and caused the engineers to put the rain into huge pipes, which then emptied it into the rivers directly with huge force, causing the creeks to erode and to deepen their channels so that they can no longer overflow into their floodplain. We've even built on the floodplain, so people are flooded and they want more pipes to take the water off, and we put it into our waterways, carrying all the contaminants from the road. There are up to 70 potential carcinogens that are deposited on roadways and parking lots by cars, from oil, gas, tires, brake linings. It's cadmium, copper, zinc. There are several others that escape me at the moment. Cadmium, copper, zinc. There's another one.
So as these go into the waterways, what does that do to the water? Let's start with the water, but then we know that there's vegetation there, and we know that there's life, fish and other types of sea life that are there. So what happens?
Well, the water carries dirt with it, and it erodes as it erodes the streams, it carries more earth with it. That clouds the water. When a development clears all the trees off, the water that runs off is cloudy, and it has what's called colloidal particles, clay particles, that are so very fine, so fine that they can't be captured by the stormwater protection devices. They are negatively charged, so they stay suspended for long periods of time, clouding the waterways, and the sun doesn't get down to the bottom of the water where the grasses need to grow, so the grasses die. And the grasses provide safe places for young crabs and fish, juvenile fish, to mature safely. So without those places, we have less crabs, and you read in the paper that we have less crabs, and the price of crabs and oysters and so on very high, because we have destroyed what's called the habitat, the places, the home for them to live safely. And the chemicals, and from farmland, the pesticides and fertilizers and sprays that are used that run off, are providing a very difficult life for fish, and they are getting sick. They have tumors. Some of them have cancers, growths, and the PCBs that are in the water are in the flesh of the fish, so that they're no longer safe for people to eat. So we are impairing the system of life that we enjoy, and the fishermen who used to make their living capturing those oysters and crabs and fish are having a hard time surviving.
Now, when the water flows, it carries more than just the dirt. I've seen we do a lot of beach cleanups, and so we see a lot of trash too. Do you see that to be true?
Oh, huge amounts of trash. Hundreds of tons of trash. You see people in a car throwing their paper out, or walking down the street, eating a candy bar, throwing the wrapper on the ground. You see trucks that aren't properly covered and carrying plastic bags or trash, and the trash blows out of the trucks. You see enormous amounts of rubber tires that have been dumped intentionally by people. Refrigerators, large equipment of all kinds. People, instead of disposing of them properly, just carry a truckload into the woods or into a stream bank and dump them. So it's a horrifying picture.
And so in what we would like to talk about today is some of these issues and some of these things are much bigger than us in dealing with development and things that are involved with government, and every one of us can have a part in that, but I'm sure that there's things that we as individual homeowners can do, and both as adults and as children, that we can do to limit the amount of stormwater that goes off into the creeks. Could you just kind of take a few minutes and say, kind of give us a brief rundown of some of the things that we might be able to do at home that would help?
There are many things that are quite easy to do. If you look at where your stormwater is directed from your rooftop, for example, if you look at your house from the outside, there's a drain that comes down from the roof and empties the stormwater. Sometimes it goes into the ground, but in many cases it's directed right onto your driveway because the driveway won't erode from the power of the drain, and it runs down into the street and into the storm drain. You can turn that or buy another piece to turn that runoff so that it, instead of going down the driveway, it goes into a planted area. If you don't have a planted area convenient, you can put an extension on it and take it to a planted area. Or you can buy a rain barrel and put a rain barrel onto it by cutting the drain off just with a hacksaw and putting it into a rain barrel. The Arlington Echo Outdoor Education Center put that into your browser, and you can buy a rain barrel from them for $75. And it can have an overflow tube at the top that can be buried in the ground so that a rainfall is often more than 55-gallon drum will hold, and so it could be introduced into the ground that way. You can use the rain barrel as a reservoir for watering, with a hose attached at the bottom for watering your garden in drought times. You can build a rain garden quite easily. There are instructions on my website. Being in Place, just one word, beinginplace.org. Normally a rain garden about 5 feet by 8 feet will accept the water from your rooftop, and what you do is dig out an area and leave it concave. You can build up, if it's a slope, you can build up the edges so that it will remain concave. Fill it with sand if you have clay soils, compost and plants, and leave it concave so that it will pond up between 6 and 8 inches during a rainstorm, and then the water will sink into the ground. It's just an easy way to have a garden that waters itself, except in times of drought. You can put, it's more costly, but if you have enough money or you have enough volunteers to dig up your asphalt driveway and throw the asphalt away, you can put in just 2, there are porous cement now, you can put in 2 tire places for your tires to run and leave the rest planted, or you can use porous paving, and that's also something you can find out from the web. If you need to repair your roof, you could put a living roof on.
And what is a living roof?
A living roof is a complex system of layers, a rubberized layer first to keep your house from leaking, and then a root excluder to keep the plant layer, to keep the plant roots from going into the rubber layer, and then a water layer to let too much water run off, and then 4 inches, 3 to 4 inches of a very light soil substitute, and then you plant wet and dry tolerant species of plants, and it will absorb between 60 and 80% of a given rainstorm. And airborne nitrogen will feed the plants, and the rainfall, which now has much of the pollutants from commercial stacks in it, will be cleaned, and the water will be clean. That comes off your roof now, but much less will come.
Yeah. So I know that there's some examples of that here in our county. I believe the brick companies have a building in Edgewater that has a living roof.
And they'd be glad to show it to anyone.
Yeah.
They have a terrace planted as the living roof is planted on the whole building, so you don't have to go up the ladder to the roof to see what. You just go up to the 4th floor and see the beautiful, in summertime, when all the sedums are in bloom, it's filled with pollinators. And that's another thing that we need to guarantee food for, because our pollinators are endangered species. And we need the pollinators, farmers need the pollinators to grow food for us.
Yeah. And I believe the other example that I'm familiar with is at Arlington Echo. I believe they have a living roof on at least one of their buildings.
Yes, and the Severn Savings Bank in Annapolis off Westgate Circle has a living roof on its parking garage, and the county put several living roofs as examples, but they're hard to see. But they did that as a dedication to the technology. The police station in Edgewater has an example of a living roof, and in Odenton there's a library that has also a rain garden.
So so one thing that I got from what you were saying is that planting trees is also very important for holding on to the water.
Absolutely, it's one of the most important things we can do, and it's quite an easy thing to do. We shouldn't have expansive lawns. We should have forests around us. And trees are good for saving us energy too. If you plant a tree on the west and north sides of your house, and especially an evergreen, it will capture the winter winds and reduce your heating bills. In the summer, if you plant on the east and south sides deciduous trees, so that in the winter you will capture that sunlight, but in the summertime you'll save it on air conditioning bills.
Very good. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell the children that we're going to be talking to about stormwater or the environment or anything about sustainable living?
I'd like to say that each of us, it needs each of us and all of us to change the effect we've had on the earth. We're entering into a very dangerous period of global warming, and we need each of us to do everything we can to change our effect, to reduce our effect on the earth. And so if the whole class could put together a project, and each person, each child could take home suggestions to the parents, and they could begin to work with others in their communities to understand some of the simple things that can be done, it would be the most peaceful and spiritually fulfilling thing they would find they have ever done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.